Good evening.
Good evening.
We're going to go ahead and reconvene the public session. Report of actions taken in closed session. John?
Yes, the City Council considered the matters listed on the agenda, and there are no reportable actions.
Thank you. If you would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and then the invocation following with Pastor Bowman. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening.
Good evening. I'd like to start with a question, and the question is, how many of you are people of prayer? I'd count myself among you all. And I think it's so important to be men and women of prayer, especially when it comes to the leadership of this beautiful city that we all love. So if we'd all bow our heads, please. Oh Lord, please instruct this council and teach them in the way that they should conduct this meeting. Please counsel them with your loving eye on the city of Norco and its needs, directions, and purposes. Let the aims of this meeting be aligned with your sovereign will and your desire to bless those who follow your statutes. Let this council's plans be orchestrated by you, and I pray that all here today seek your advice. Let us not make decisions based upon our limited wisdom, but let us act based upon your infinite wisdom. Proverbs 29:2 says, with good men in authority, the people rejoice. Let this council lead well and prosper so that the people will rejoice. Lastly, Father, let your will be done in this meeting so this can be a meeting that is based upon your desires. Whatever your desire be, let the result follow your will, follow your heart, follow your statutes. All these things I pray in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Okay, we're going to have a couple of presentations. First is Historic Preservation Commission. Chairman Carolyn Morse is going to tell us about Horse Week activities. Good evening.
Well, the whole goal here is to make our little history room located at the community center well known throughout the community so people come to visit. We're open on Fridays from noon till 4. We have an ad running in the Horse Week book for this time, so everyone can see. And we're going to have a display at the chili cook-off, and then we have some posters that we're going to hang up. Since we're celebrating 50 years this year, the Horse Week started in 1972 with a duel in front of Ranchland Market and continues without the duels, but we have 6 posters made up from covers of old books. These were all donated by Joel Becerra of AFS Printing. So we want to thank him very much. So, you can hang them off, show them all?
Oh, yeah.
So these will be hanging up in the Weaver Hall throughout Horse Week. And we will have a table with some goodies on it to show off from the city. And they will also, we'll be handing out a little brochure where people can remember to find us. So, but we just wanted to inform everybody this is what we're working on. (1972) We have quite a few books that we will have on display throughout April, so people can come in and see what Horse Week was like for the last 50 years.
Good.
And that's important.
What are the hours again for everybody? At the what are your hours at the community center?
Our hours
again?
are Fridays from noon to 4.
Okay.
I know a lot of people work down that time, but, you know, some other time we will be open, maybe. But right now that works for us.
Good. Is there anything?
Thank you, Greg.
Oh, always. You're more than welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, come on by.
We will.
It's to the south side of the community center in the Bob and Carlene Heritage Room. Bob and
right where
Carlene
it is?
Allen
Been
Heritage
there.
Room. Okay.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank
Good to
you.
see you.
Okay, I'd like to call upon Dr. Sigrid Williams, who's going to talk about the Community Emergency Response Team update. Hi, Sigrid.
Hello there. All right, good evening, Mayor Newton, council members, staff, and residents of Norco. For the residents of Norco that don't know me, I am Dr. Sigrid Williams, Associate Professor in Administration of Justice at Norco College. My public service began as a lifeguard, transitioned into the legal field. I became a police officer after that, was cert trained and certified in search and rescue. I've been employed in public safety for the last 40 years. Just to give you a basic idea of who I am. I am really excited and proud to share with you this evening that Norco College will be offering training in Community Emergency Response Team, also known as CERT, and extending this training to businesses and employees within the city, residents of Norco, and our surrounding communities. Each of you should have a green folder that has this presentation in it, along with many of our ancillaries that are pertaining to our program.
It was a warm, beautiful day, and the excitement in the air was the battle of the Bay between the two baseball teams, the Giants and the A's. My family was sitting down to dinner with the television on to watch the World Series game, and then the earthquake started. The television blacked out, there was noise everywhere. All of a sudden, the ground was shaking, the walls were shaking. It's like being on an ocean liner that's hit a huge wave or a storm at sea.
The fire in Oakland is a major fire, a large fire nearly half a block long. Bay Bridge has been lost.
It was the scariest thing I'd ever been through. And I think the worst thing about it was not knowing what to do after.
And her words resonated with us, and the worst thing about it was not knowing what to do after. The words we hear time and time again after disaster and individuals not knowing what to do. CERT is a 24 to 28 hour training program on basic disaster preparedness and response skills. It begins with identifying hazards in the home, at work, and in neighborhoods, and this is CERT. So why CERT? The purpose of CERT is to act as a force multiplier in the event of a disaster. CERTs provide support while professional emergency responders focus on more dangerous, skilled, and critical assignments. Everyone that works within the public sector is considered a disaster service worker. This doesn't mean that everyone has to be trained as a CERT member, but the information and resources can help anyone in the event of an emergency. CERTs are formed to be better prepared for the hazards and emergencies which threaten our communities. CERT programs provide training, practical experience, and a connection to others. And of course, while CERT is voluntary, our actions as public employees are governed by law, and the law is pretty clear, as you can see on the board. We are expected to work during a disaster in some form. The CERT program is also not new. It was developed in 1985 by the Los Angeles Fire Department and became a national program in 1993. Norco College was approved by the state in 2018 to teach the CERT program to its faculty and staff. Now we are expanding this training within our region to anyone interested in CERT training with our newly approved CERT program using a consistent nationwide approach to disaster volunteer training. Where does CERT fit in? When an emergency occurs, it will be our local first responders that will be stretched thin. When we add CERT to the equation, those trained in CERT become a support network of volunteers to our first responders. CERT programs are also a benefit to any community or workplace. People who go through CERT training have a better understanding of the potential threats that might show themselves after a disaster. This program trains the community how they can take the right steps to lessen the effects of hazards on themselves, their homes, and their workplaces. Most importantly, it's about having a plan. CERT members can assist others in their neighborhoods or workplace following a disaster when professional first responders are not immediately available to help. Now, what CERT members cannot do. They cannot play first responders. CERT members are not trained firefighters. They should not enter buildings that may be dangerous. They should not try to clean up hazardous materials. They should not play doctor, firefighter, or police trained in search and rescue. CERT members cannot activate or deploy themselves. And let me say that again, CERT members cannot activate or deploy themselves. And this will all be taught as part of our curriculum. It's not if, it's when a disaster will happen. CERT training, first and foremost, is about protecting family and personal safety. As registered CERT volunteers with the city, your members will report as soon as possible after a major disaster and assist only when requested, taking the necessary steps to keep themselves and their loved ones safe. Items that we will include in the training begin with developing an emergency plan. Who's involved, who's your out-of-state contact, who to leave or when to shelter in place, where will you meet your family, where do you check in, what routes, and several alternatives you will use to evacuate your neighborhood. How long will it take you to get to your meeting place? How will you escape your home or your workplace or your school or even your place of worship? Do you have transportation, and what type of transportation? Just as an example, each year Mike and I, Mike being my husband, go over our emergency plan. We know who to call, where to meet, and where to leave a note for each other when we're away from our home. And that's not inside any building, that's somewhere on our property. We will also talk about basic CERT equipment that participants will learn to store and use correctly, including the safety vest, proper shoes to wear, having a helmet to protect your head, goggles to protect your eyes, a mask to help breathe without taking in toxins, and of course gloves. Now, I understand the skepticism of some that may ask, why should I get involved? I could get sued. Of course, California is a litigious state. The Federal Volunteer Protection Act of 1997 protects CERT members as long as they stay within their lane as a CERT member and not try to be anything more. As I mentioned before, CERT members are not first responders, but they can protect themselves and assist others before first responders arrive. CERT members can also provide other services to their communities. With proper training, CERT members can promote community awareness, supplement staffing at local and special events, assist with evacuations, participate in training exercises, identify and aid neighbors, coworkers who might need assistance. They can do demos, they can staff first aid booths at special events, and they can also educate others about the role and value of CERT. So how does one get involved? Come this fall, anyone can register for the CERT training through our non-credit program at no cost to them. Our program will provide training, practical application, and how to work with others as a team. Again, the skills needed to help themselves and to help others. So how did this all come about? Last year, some Norco residents voiced an interest in this program. I also found out that businesses and schools in the area also voiced interest in the CERT program, but it never materialized. Last year, a council member at a council meeting asked why the city did not have their own CERT program. So of course, sitting in the audience, I asked the same question and immediately came up with a solution. I spoke with Chief Ike and Lieutenant Rowan about collaborating together to bring the best CERT training program to the city through Norco College, and they were immediately on board. I brought my idea to the college administration, our academic senate, and they were also on board. And now we look forward to establishing a partnership with the city of Norco with our CERT program. And that brings me here to our deliverables. Norco College will be the sponsoring organization for training refresher courses and meeting locations. Norco College has the subject matter experts in public safety and emergency management. We also have certified trainers and a soon-to-be master trainer. We will provide all course materials and ancillaries. Our program will include FEMA nationally syndicated curriculum and learning outcomes. The Riverside Community College District Board of Trustees has approved the course of outline of record with the required FEMA modalities. We will also provide and oversee all required training for volunteers to be certified in CERT and deployable as CERT members. Norco College will also provide all materials needed for exercises and disaster simulations, oversee FEMA registration, provide a certificate of completion with achieved competencies, and you have an example in your folder, standard CERT kits and emergency first aid booklets, and provide the disaster service worker application to all participants. Norco College will also solicit funding through the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, and other grant opportunities, market the program to the community or to the college community and within the region through our educational platform. I've also secured most of the materials in Spanish and Chinese for those in our community that may struggle with the English language. This program is for everyone, including our elderly or those with disabilities. It's community focused. Everyone has a place, a role in being prepared, and the ability to help others. It's really about community preparedness and community readiness. When it comes to the certificates, a certificate of completion will be issued through Norco College's non-credit program, again at no cost to the participant. Acknowledgement and confirmation of a participant's FEMA independent studies, which include a variety of universal command and emergency management systems. The competencies also include specialized training in awareness and preparedness with animals and disasters involving livestock. We are also working on developing an extended non-credit state-recognized certificate with additional courses in basic first aid, CPR, and a variety of other courses. Norco College also has a fantastic marketing and strong workforce department. We developed our own CERT logo, which includes Norco College's library, which is under the T, Norco Hills, King Palms. It does not include Pumpkin Rock, but we did include 2 riders on horseback, which confirms a bridge between our college and our community. Now to the city's responsibilities. In January, I met with your city manager, your emergency services assistant, Matthew Jones from the emergency services coordinator for the county of Riverside, and Chief Fike. Their acknowledgement of our robust, all-inclusive program is why I am being given more than 3 minutes to stand up here and talk to you today. Why I was given this opportunity to present this program to you tonight. During that meeting, I provided them with the materials you have in front of you. I also gave them manuals on managing a CERT program and, of course, a risk management overview for local CERT programs. First, the city will need to apply to become a CERT program manager, and then you build your CERT community. You create a profile, you create your contact directory, you provide all the administrative office work. The city will also be responsible for program management. You choose who will be part of your CERT volunteer program, the requirements, and who and when to deploy. The city should also apply for the DHS with Department of Homeland Security and FEMA grants to offset the costs, not only to manage your program, but help defray the cost of the emergency CERT kits, which every participant who finishes the program will keep. The city will need its own equipment. A general list from other cities with CERT programs is also included in your folder as examples. You will market the program to the community, and you can use 6th Street, Silver Lake signage, inserts in utility bills, and or the city's website as just a couple of examples. And then a real neat program is VIMS, which is the Volunteer Integrated Management System that many government agencies use for their volunteer programs. This software allows your volunteers to log their hours during training and or when they are deployed. It's also an audit trail for the city to see active and inactive members. VIMS or any comparable software program to log volunteer hours is important because the federal government recognizes the national value of a volunteer hour to be $28.54. As part of any strategic plan, this information is vital on how much a city or public entity saves when utilizing volunteers. It also helps in legitimizing programs and when applying for grants. And just as an example, my husband and I, we are both actively involved in the Santa Ana River unit of Backcountry Horsemen of California. We belong to one of 212 chapters throughout the United States. Our parent organization is Backcountry Horsemen of America. In 2020, Backcountry Horsemen of America volunteers spent over 196,000 hours working to maintain trails on public lands for public use, and that equates to a value of about $8.4 million. Since 1995, Backcountry Horsemen of America members contributed a value equal to $170.8 million in volunteer hours. So here's a program that legitimizes itself through data. So tracking volunteer hours is very important in any volunteer program, and it's something you might consider. So I'm proud to be a Norconian. Norco is my home. It's my city. I'm also lucky to be able to work in the city of Norco. Having worked emergencies and disasters as a first responder, a police officer, an emergency medical technician, and as part of a search and rescue team, public safety has been and always will continue to be one of my passions. And now my position as an educator allows me the opportunity to teach and train others in public safety and emergency preparedness. CERT is a way for everyone to learn how to be prepared. Our program is inclusive and diverse, taking into account all participants, including differently abled persons. At Norco College, we have identified hidden barriers. The program is free, so we have eliminated any socioeconomic concerns. Written materials are available in numerous languages, and we recognize the dynamics of our region's familial backgrounds. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Does council have any questions?
Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Ed?
Sigurd, thank you very much for this presentation. I appreciate all the efforts you have done to put this in the college, to put this program together. I know there's people in the room here that went through the Cert Training years ago. Do you have the criteria where they will need the recertification, or has that been written up yet?
There is no criteria for recertification. It's suggested that every few years you recertify, and as a non-credit program, they can come back through and take it again, or become role players, and they can recert that way.
It's one of those things that's a lost skill unless you refresh it. That's like an art. We train all the time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Robin?
Thank you all.
Sigrid, thanks. I really appreciate you bringing forward a solution.
Happy to do so.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call upon Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer to start council communications.
Nothing to report.
Catherine?
Yes, on March 17th, I attended the Northwest Mosquito and Vector Control District Board meetings. They have a social media, and they're going to be working on getting information out to the community. So if you are curious as to when they're going to be spraying and what's happening, I suggest that you follow them. They're on Instagram and Twitter and all of those. And then on March 29th, I attended the Western Riverside County Regional Wastewater Authority meeting, and it was on site. 100% of Norco's wastewater is treated by this plant, so it was really good to get out there and see how they're doing that and what they're doing to make sure they're keeping up with all of the wastewater that we're sending them.
I attended a lot of things. I don't actually have a whole much of a report to make. Lots of things happening at WRCOG. At some point, we probably need to have a discussion, Andy, to sort of bring everybody up to speed on that. But right now, we'll sort of wait. Lots of changes over there. RCA, we're looking at purchasing quite a bit of property. I'm really happy to say that that plan is coming along very well. I think the most fun I had was attending the T-ball opening day. So I'll just leave it at that.
Ted?
Thank you. I tell you what, I went to a bunch of meetings and things like that, and I apologize. I have Homes for Humanity. It's Homes for Family. It's because I don't check my notes. I went to the Builders Ball up in Los Angeles on Saturday, March 26th. I was a guest up there with him. What a good program. They actually work to build homes for veterans. And it's not just a rental unit. These are homes for veterans. The veterans have to buy into it. There's sweat equity they put into it. These builders come through. But I got the privilege of sitting up there that night and sitting next to a veteran. He's a active duty National Guardsman. He works out of Burbank. His wife and their 4 children are on this program. And I tell you how good of the program. This program is through donations, and it's ran by the group of Homes for Families. And as part of it, one of their big contributors is Calvet. This young man and his wife and 4 children live in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And what they did was they help them with it. They own this home. They work together, and their monthly payment, their mortgage payment, $1,400 a month. This is a new home. It's up in Palmdale. So these are the kind of programs that are good programs to get to know about. It's important. It's important for our veterans to take care of it. This community is all veterans. They had to go through several weeks, I think it was at least 6 months, of learning how to be a homeowner, learning how to do your finances. And all these people had to go through and learn to it. So this is important. These are young families to start out, the kind that we want in our town, young families, naturally. So the council, we're pursuing something like this. This was just one of many. But these are the kind of things that, like I said, to see the smile on his face, this young man, they would have never been able to afford a house today. You see the market today. So, but to do that, and a lot of these are done through donations, the builders up there, and big builders, big donators. So this is good. And I tell you, I give kudos to Homes for Families for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. I have no reports other than I'm going to agree with Kevin. The opening day at T-Ball was the highlight of what we do on City Council. Okay, let's move into consent calendar. I'll call upon the city clerk, please.
All items listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and may be enacted by one motion. Prior to the motion to consider any action by the presiding governmental body, any public comments or any of the consent items will be heard. There will be no separate action unless members of the governmental body or audience request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar. Items removed from consent calendar will be separately considered under item 3 of the agenda.
Thank you, Dana. Just to note, item 2E is going to be removed from staff, and we will continue that item off calendar. Are there any items that need to be pulled?
C is in Charles, 2C.
2C. Dana, are there any public comments?
Yes. Item 2C was also being requested by the community, and then item 2G was also requested by the community to be pulled.
Okay. I'll ask for a motion to approve the remaining items.
Please vote. Did it pop up?
Pop up.
The green one. Got it.
Where do I go?
Agenda notes. The green agenda notes.
Oh.
We're gonna get this. This is only our second try at this.
I don't have anything.
Okay, it was there.
Back. Oh, that's right.
Okay.
The upper left.
Back to training for Councilmember Bash. Okay.
Aye.
Good job, Kevin.
Hit the back button at the top. See the back button at the top? Try that.
Very, very top. We'll get you set up. Councilmember Bash? Got it?
Agenda button in the upper.
I don't.
I didn't see
I
it pop
see
up.
it.
Hit that one. Yeah, hit that button.
I'll call this vote, and then I'll come and help you. Councilmember Bash?
Yes.
Okay. And the motion carries with 5 ayes.
Thank you. 2C, Ted, you pull this. Let's
Yes, thank you, Mr.
go
Mayor.
first.
Yeah, I'm for the extension of this and on the lease agreement, but I do have some questions to ask, and for Michelle on this one. I'm looking at there, and we had this discussion, and when I look at that in reference to the lease agreement, it has references to the 4-H and pole barns in there, which we don't have anymore. So my question on that is, I guess it would be to the fair representative, is there going to be a 4-H and livestock show there, since we're probably going to be in the middle of building at that time?
I don't believe I'm the one to answer that. I would assume there will be, but I think there needs to be discussion between the organization and the 4-H.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That's why I would love to hear from him. And if we are, then what are we going to do to accommodate it? So that was it. So, and I see Gonzo sitting there, so I can wait to hear from him if the rest of the council doesn't object.
We'll find out what cards have been submitted.
Okay.
Item 2C.
For item 2C, Gonzalo Murillo.
Good evening.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. In regards to 2C, well, Ted, to regards to your question, we do plan on having that portion of it. We just haven't exactly figured out how we're going to place it, because we do anticipate, of course, that's going to be under construction, so that whole area will probably be out of the question. But we do plan on having that portion, but to what extent, we're not exactly sure yet, because we're still working on our layout. You know, this is going to be an extraordinary year. It's kind of like reinventing the wheel in a sense, because of course we've been dormant for a couple of years and there's been a lot going on, and but we do plan on having that, and I would really appreciate it. In regards to see if we can get the extension, that would be really appreciated. You know, we're working with the 2019 budget, and we're in 2022 with super high prices. Of course, everybody knows what inflation is doing to everyone now. But we'd like to put a fair, an event this year for our community, what the community deserves. You know, we're starting to see some normalcy, and we're hoping that as the year goes on, we'll see a lot more of that. So in that regard, I'm saying that we're going to put the best damn show we can. Sorry.
It's all right.
With the circumstances, of course, you know. But yes, we do plan on having a full-on fair like we've always had. Better, maybe, but it's going to be a great fair for sure. So
Good.
in that regards, thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you. Any other cards? Dana, any other cards?
I have no further speaker cards, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I can, with that, and like I said, I'm going to move to approve it, and with the hope that once we find out what the schedule is, that we can bring back something that we can accommodate the 4-H and FFA shows that, and my fellow council member here, Mr. Grunmeyer, is making sure that it's done to where it's suitable and correct for this community, because that's this fair. Like I said, when I was a kid, it's 4-H and FFA. That's what it's all about, and so we want to make sure that we accommodate for those. So with that, I'll move to approve.
Second.
technically challenged.
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Item 2G. Ted, you pulled that?
No, that wasn't mine.
Pardon?
The community pulled that one.
Okay. Community only.
It would be Lacey Matson.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Lacey Matson. I'm the lead speaker and negotiator for Local 606. Local 606 represents Norco's Public Works and Public Parks employees. I am here on behalf of all the Local 606 members to say that they object to the passing of the Employer-Employee Relations Resolution because the city has failed to meet and consult with the local, which they are entitled to under the Myers-Mealis-Brown Act. On March 10th, 2022, the local received an email from Cindy Balderas containing a proposed updated version of the Employee Resolution. In the email, Mrs. Balderas stated that the local has until the end of day on March 21st, 2022 to let her know if he would like to discuss the updated resolution. On March 17th, 2022, the local responded, "We have reviewed both documents, and at this time, we do not agree with some of the language in the new resolution. We have sent the documents to our attorneys for further review. I will send you a statement regarding our concerns once I have heard back from our attorneys." Ms. Balderas responded to their email on March 17th with saying, "We need to get it on the agenda, therefore we still need your feedback by the end of the business day, March 21st, 2022. On March 25th, 2022, the local sent an email to the mayor, all council members, as well as Ms. Balderas and Andy Oker, stating in part, the city ceased and desist from taking action on the proposed resolution, that we wanted to meet and consult the proposed resolution. We even asked the city to provide dates in which we could meet and consult. On March 29th, 2022, Ms. Balderas responded, "The city has fulfilled its obligation under California Government Code Section 3057A to provide all employee labor associations an opportunity to meet and consult on the proposed updated employee relations resolution." On March 30th, 2022, the local's attorney sent an email once again to the mayor, city council members, Ms. Balderas, and Mr. Andy Oker, stating in part the city has not lawfully filled their obligation to meet and consult. As of the date, we have not had a response back from that email from the city or anyone else. The local has never been provided a real opportunity to meet and consult, whether the city only requested the feedback and then refused to meet and consult. The legal duty to meet and consult requires the parties to meet in good faith to exchange information, opinions, and proposals. The parties are further required to endeavor to reach an agreement. This has never happened. The local has not had a meeting to consult in good faith, and I again request the city cease and desist from taking action on the proposed resolution until we have had a chance to meet and consult. The first resolution wasn't adapted until 1971. There was an amendment in 1975 to that one. What is it going to be to take a couple more weeks so that the city can meet with Local 606 on a few problems that they have with the new proposed resolution? If you guys decide to pass the resolution tonight, Local 606 is going to have to seek advice from their legal counsel. So at this time, we ask that the item 2G, the resolution, be removed from the calendar. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, questions by council? John, do you have anything to weigh in? Okay. Just take it. And appreciate your public comments. Thank you.
I have no further speaker cards for this item, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Entertain a motion. Second.
Oh, okay.
Under discussion for the benefit of the public, John, can you clarify whether the city has met its obligation in terms of the words that were used were meet and there's two different, meet and confer. Can you clarify for those who are here, please?
Essentially, meet and confer pertains to labor negotiations, meet and consult. Like with this, they're generally management rights, but nonetheless, the statute requires meet and consult. I've really been involved one way or the other, but the position of the staff is that there was an opportunity provided, there was a response, and it wasn't followed up by here's what our concerns are, or we would like to meet on XYZ date. I mean,
So we have not heard back on any of the concerns or a request to meet, and we're under the law, meeting and consulting is what is required in this instance.
To the best of my knowledge, they've not provided any specific concerns, although that would normally happen in a meet and consult meeting, and it's up to the council. If the council wishes to continue it to have that happen, fine.
So this is basically just cleaning up a resolution from 1971.
Yeah, I mean,
updating with new state laws.
Essentially, yes.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Go ahead and vote. Should be on your screen. Motion passes with 5 ayes.
Okay. Dana, let's move into public comments.
Public comments. This is the time when persons wishing to address the presiding governmental body regarding matters not on the agenda may be heard. Please submit a speaker card to the meeting clerk. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less. The Ralph M. Brown Act limits the governmental body's ability to respond to comments on non-agendized matters at the time such comments are made. The governmental body shall not discuss or act relative to any general public comment. Mayor, the first public speaker is Mike Thompson. Excuse me.
Hi, Mike.
Good evening, Council. A couple of things quickly. I'd like you guys to consider that when a project goes to the Planning Commission, that the grading plans might also be included for their review. We all remember, most of us remember what happened at the New Stater Brothers, where the dirt pad went up and the problems that caused. And over at the Palomino Park, on 2nd Street, the first buildings to go up, those old houses that were on the south side of 2nd Street were ground level with 2nd Street. And the parking lot behind them for the egg ranch, again, was all the original grade was level with 2nd Street. The dirt work went in, they raised those pads up for those buildings 6 feet. You can go over there and have a look, you'll see them. The top of the grade now is even with the top of the fence. You know, those buildings, when they went through planning, were given a little leeway on the building heights on that whole project, so they were allowed to go up even a little farther. And with that 6 feet, those people that exist on 2nd Street they're looking at a huge wall. We caught this on the 3rd Street project that so far has failed. That developer wanted to raise the pad, and maybe if this was part of the review for the Planning Commission, you know, even us citizens might be able to pick it up, you know, reading the agenda item. So that's just one request that you might think about Planning Commission review. And the other thing that I've mentioned before was the Architectural Review Committee. I know there's 2 planning commissioners that do that now, and it kind of bothers me that I think that maybe that should be residents, because you know, a planning commissioner might think that the architecture is great, but then when they come back for the second time for the same project to approve the project as a planning commissioner, they might have to deny the project for different reasons or so. But you know, that kind of goes back to the thing like when Berwin was on council with Red Barns, and you know, the architecture of Western versus whether it matches the house or not. That might be a benefit if that was residents instead of planning commissioners. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Good points.
Our next speaker is Jeff Cahan.
Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, residents. I'd like to introduce you to Samuel. Samuel died last year. Samuel died on June 22nd. I received my liver transplant on June 23rd. I'd like to read this letter that I got from Sam's mother. Sam was 18 years old when he passed, and he had just finished high school and was preparing to start college. Sam was the youngest of 6 children. He has 2 older brothers and 3 older sisters. Sam loved anything and everything about the outdoors, from camping and hunting in the mountains to boating and fishing in the ocean. We often referred to Sam as a gentle giant. He was always tall for his age, but was so gentle. Sam gave the best hugs and had the most loving heart and was truly an old soul. Sam was always willing to help others, and it came as no surprise when he made the decision to sign up as a donor. We miss Sam terribly, but we are comforted by the fact that he lives on through you and others. We hope you are doing well and on the road to a full recovery. April is Donate Life Month. I would respectfully request that the City Council offer up a proclamation recognizing April as Donate Life Month. I now have 3 people that have died for me: Jesus Christ, the United States veteran, and Sam. I am 98% Jeff and I am 2% Sam. He lives because he gave me life. I would like to recommend anybody who's not a donor to please go to donatelife.net and decide if you'd like to help save a life. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Mayor and City Council, we have worked already with Donate Life. They have reached out to us, and we have provided them their proclamation for the month of April. So we are collaborating with them. They will be posting that on their website.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Jeff.
I have one last speaker card, Greg Bowen.
I think you missed your window, Greg.
Yeah, I think I did.
Yeah, so you get.
I
How are
want to
you?
thank everybody. I've grown up in this town. It's an awesome town. Kevin, all you guys. I've been on other committees with UKIPA, the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department, Rodeo, and let's take UKIPA for instance. UKIPA helps out for their rodeo. They're having a second rodeo this year. UKIPA doesn't pay anything for their grounds. UKIPA doesn't pay anything for their security. The city picks up the tab for it. They help them out considerably. And I'm not saying Norco does. I mean, every one of you guys jump through hoops to help us out. But with this, everything going up and everything skyrocketing, I've heard comments from all the committee because I help out with all of them. And they're all saying the same thing. It's scary. They don't know if they don't sell out and they don't get that funding from the city, we may not have a rodeo, we may not have a fair, we may not have a horse week. And it's really scary. And I watch these people jump through hoops, go out and get donations, but then we have to pay a large amount for our security. We have to pay a large amount for our arena. And we have to, our bleachers have just gone up. Our insurance has gone up. Everything under the sun has happened to us along with COVID. And I'm just making you aware of this. And if there's anything you could do to help out, Horse Week, the fair, the rodeo. I mean, these been around, this is the icon. Everybody, when they speak of Norco, those are the 3 things that pop up. And I'm sure there's tons of other ones, but that's what I'm speaking on today is those. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
I have no further speaker cards, Mayor.
Thank you. Let's move into item 5, legislative matters. Item 5A is ordinance number 1080, second reading. There'll be no discussion on this item. I'll ask for a motion to approve.
Second.
Vote. Please vote. There you go. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5B is an ordinance number 1081, a second reading. Once again, there'll be no discussion on this item. I'll ask for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move into discussion action items. I'll once again call upon the city clerk.
Order of presentation for discussion items. Number 1, staff report presentation. 2, council questions of staff. 3, public comment. 4, council discussion and action.
Thank you, Dana. Item 6A is the creation of a city council subcommittee to review and recommend the structure, composition, and role and responsibilities for the Economic Development Advisory Council. Andy?
Yes,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor, members of the City Council. Yes, the purpose of this item is for City Council to create a subcommittee of consisting of 2 council members, and then the rest of the members of the subcommittee will be determined later on with respect to whether EDAC, existing EDAC members may be participants in that structure. But the primary purpose is to review the current structure of EDAC to make sure that that structure is fully is structured properly to meet the goals of EDAC. EDAC was created in 1990. The primary purpose of that of EDAC was to articulate programs, economic programs, and bring recommendations to the City Council to improve the economy of Norco. As you know, economic development is one of the key ways that the city ensures a strong financial condition. Since the formation of EDAC back in 1990, there have been many changes to the composition of EDAC membership, as well as the eligibility criteria for participating in EDAC. Over years, I think the committee has somewhat lost a little bit of a focus in terms of being able to achieve the primary mission, which is again to articulate and provide recommendations to the City Council that will result in economic development projects. I think given where we are with respect to our strategic plan and the need to continue to deploy effective economic development programs, this is a time, I believe, for us to go back and look at the way EDAC is structured to be sure that both the structure as well as the composition of membership is properly put in a way to make sure that the goals of EDAC as articulated back in 1990 can be achieved. So with that, what staff is recommending is for the City Council to appoint 2 council members to participate in the group that will review and determine how best to structure EDAC to be sure that it meets its objectives.
Thank you, Andy. Council questions to staff. Kevin, start with you.
I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Catherine? Robin?
No question.
Ted? No questions? Good.
No, I have one. Andy, how long you expect this? You got 2 council members and staff initially, correct? And then go from there as to incorporate?
That's correct.
So do you have a timetable how long this is going to take to get up to par on this until we bring people together? I mean, I'm just...
Yeah, bringing people together shouldn't take no more than a couple of weeks in terms of determining how we want to structure this committee. In terms of the committee doing its work, and then that is necessary to determine the proper structure for EDAC going forward. That is going to take a little bit of time, but hopefully is something that can be completed in 60 days.
Okay. As like I said, being a former member of EDAC, it was I think when we took the council off, it's caused a big difference. So thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Dana, do we have any public comment?
I have no speaker cards for this item, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bringing it back to council discussion and action, do any council members wish to serve on this subcommittee?
I'd be happy to serve on the committee.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I also would like to serve on it.
All right. Without objection, we'll appoint council members Catherine Allman and Ted Hoffman. I guess that would be a recommendation. Do we need to vote on that? Thank you.
Be appointing council members Hoffman and Alleman to serve to the motion in front of you. And motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to item 6B, this is authorizing appropriation as determined by the City Council from the American Rescue Plan Act fund allocation to provide financial assistance in the support of city co-sponsored community events. Andy.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, this item is a discussion we started at the mid-year budget process. And the idea that was discussed at that particular time was the potential to provide funding for 3 community groups to help them deal with their rising costs related to bleacher rentals as they prepare to undertake their annual events at Ingalls Equestrian Center this calendar year 2022. The cost increase related to the bleacher rentals for these organizations, based on what they paid back in 2019, which was the last year they held these activities, the cost increase is estimated to be about $10,000 for each one of these organizations. These organizations do promote the community. They do help put up events that support local community organizations, as well as make donations to groups here in the city of Norco. The recommendation also the discussion for the City Council is also to discuss the potential for providing additional financial support to the Norco Fair Committee based on the loss of revenues last year, back in 2020 actually, based on the fact that they had prepared to put up the event. This is actually Horse Week, I'm sorry, not Norco Fair, to put up the event, and they could not do that event because of COVID. They have represented that because of inability to put on that event. The event cost them about $23,000. The discussion also that council is asked to decide, number one is how much, if any, amount should be provided to these groups in support of their community-supported events or City of Norco supported events. And if the City Council decides to provide financial support to these entities, it is recommended that those the funding come from the American Rescue Plan allocation that the city received last year. And that will consist of both the $10,000 potential allocation to each of these community groups, as well as the $23,000 that was represented to have been lost by Horse Week as a result of the cancellation of the event back in 2020. Again, this is clearly, staff doesn't have any specific recommendation on this. It's for the City Council to discuss and then determine the amount that should be allocated if the City Council decides to do so.
John, I just want to make sure, are we establishing any kind of precedent whatsoever with this?
No, it's a one-time deal, particularly given the source of funds.
Great, thank you.
Have we received a formal request from any of the groups to the city?
Our department has not. I don't know if Andy, if you have.
No, there has been no official request directly from any of the organizations.
Okay. And did any of the organizations apply or receive any of the small business or nonprofit grant money?
So one of the organizations here did apply to receive the grant fund, which is $5,000 maximum that could have been granted. This particular organization, that application was denied because of the type of organization that is a 501c4 organization, which is expressly excluded by Treasury regulations with respect to the grant aspect of this. But that doesn't mean that the city could not provide financial support from these funds to carry out specific activities that are community-oriented activities.
And a C4 can engage in political activity? That's the difference from a C3?
That is one of the differences from a 501c3 is that 501c4 organization can engage in political activities. Also, contributions to a 501c4 is not deductible for individuals who make contributions to such organizations compared to a 501c3 organization.
Okay. And since we haven't received a formal request, then I would assume that we don't have any documentation that validates a financial need. Is that a correct assumption? Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
I'd like to hear the cards, please.
Yes, we have speaker cards. The first one is Denise Sutherland.
Hi. Good. Yourself? Thank you. My name is Denise Sutherland. I am the treasurer of 3 organizations in this city: Lake Norconian Club, the Norco Fair Committee, and Rural. We all applied for this grant money. Lake Norconian Club received the $5,000 because we are a 501c3, about the only one in town. I applied for the grant money for the Norco Fair, provided all the financials, so everybody had all that, so you could see our losses. And then I did not apply for rural. But rural is a 501c4. Fair is a 501c4. I want to let everybody know that as a nonprofit, we may not have had any income coming in, but we had a lot of expenses going out. We have very high directors and officers liability insurance. We kept that current. We have storage units. It cost us about $5,000 or $10,000 a year. The fair cost us $358,000 to put on in 2019. Okay, today, when we're getting our bids to start up our 2022, our prices have increased 82 to over 100%. My husband's in charge of the grounds, and what was $15,000 for porta potties and fencing is now $30,000. So this is going to really help us. Lake Norconian Club received the $5,000. We also applied and received a grant from the county of Riverside for $5,000. So we got $10,000, of which we spent $5,000 on Pearl Harbor Day. So this money is very, very important to us, especially now with having no income at all. Some of the groups only have real small functions that we do throughout the year. So appreciate the opportunity to get this money. I think it's kind of a discrimination thing with the 501c4s, regardless that it's a non-taxable item for people to give us the money, but it helps us a lot. So anything that we can promote to get our fair, like Gonzo says, this is going to be the biggest, baddest fair. I'm telling you, next week it's going to be crazy, standing room only at that rodeo. I'm running the rodeo for the ticket sales and the gates, so come on out and see us, and we hope to cash that check real soon. Thank you so much.
The next speaker is Diane Summers.
Hi, good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Council. Thank you for giving me the time to speak today. I am here tonight on behalf of the volunteers regarding the matter of providing financial assistance for the 3 largest events in the city of Norco: Horse Week, Norco Mounted Posse Rodeo, and the Fair. I would first like to start off by thanking Mr. Hoffman for advocating for the volunteers who tirelessly work for the city of Norco to put on these fabulous events. These bring funds to our local businesses. It markets the city of Norco. We have been awarded for the grounds in the city of Las Vegas and recognized for one of our events. It also provides community activities for them to attend, and most importantly, giving back to the community. All of these events raise money to give back to our community, to give back to many organizations. And sometimes I feel like I don't do a good job of communicating to everyone the money that we spend on various events and charities. The Norco Mounted Posse has been in existence for 56 years, and this year we are back with a vengeance to do our 36th anniversary rodeo. It has been an all-volunteer organization representing Norco for 56 years. I would like to take this opportunity to quickly tell you some information that might help you with your decision. As everyone has stated, the costs have gone up. When I started 6 years ago doing this role, our cost was around $190,000. This year, with all our bids that are coming in, we are running at about $253,000. We lost our major sponsor in Browning Dodge, who is telling us they no longer have the funds, so we lost a major sponsor. There's only so much that we can go up in ticket prices. You know, people are feeling inflation. We want them to come out and enjoy the rodeo, but we don't want to gouge them and put all the cost on them. We do need to save our Western heritage. As everyone knows, there's an attack on rodeos in LA County. It started with the circuses, and now they're attacking the rodeo. We do try to donate to Western heritage. It's also to support volunteerism for our community. And cities do help. Other cities that help are San Dimas, Jurupa, Yucaipa, Industry, San Bernardino. They all help their committees by allowing them to have the grounds free, and even somebody as big as Tucson Rodeo. And most importantly is the reason is that we give back. And here is a list of some of the groups: Norco FFA, St. Jude's Hospital, Horsetown USA Hoff, Norco High School Cheerleaders, the Lake Norconian Foundation, Veterans Benefit Team Roping, thank you, and Support Sisters.
Very loud. You turned it down. Scared me. The next speaker is Bonnie Slager.
Good
Hi,
evening.
Bonnie.
First of all, I'd like to clear up something that Councilmember Allen said. There are two types of C4s, as you and I spoke on the phone. Some C4s can support politically, and some C4s cannot. Norco Horsemen's is one of those that cannot, as the fair and Horse Week are all the type of C4 that do not support political causes. So I did want to clear that up. As the community and everybody gains from these events, I want to tell you specifically how Norco Horsemen's Association gains from this event, where we have specific fundraisers for scholarships for high school students and specific fundraiser for our help with the seniors and pets. We have operating expenses. We rent a storage unit, we have a post office box, we have insurance, we have printing costs. Our costs of operations run about $7,000 a year. By helping with the fair, the rodeo, and Horse Week, we earn about the $7,000 that we need to cover our operating costs so that we can volunteer in the community and can help with things. So I want you to recognize the impact of these events on these nonprofits such as Norco Horsemen's Association and Rural, where we get our operating expenses covered by this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
I have no further speaker cards, Mayor.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, we'll bring this back for council discussion and action. Kevin?
So I'm in full support of this. Some good points raised. I mean, when you stop and think about it, the fair's been around for 74 years. The posse, 56 years. Horse Week, 50 years. I mean, I dare say thousands of volunteers have probably supported this. I know that back when I was a commissioner, Horse Week, they used to give money to my teams. I mean, I know the money trickles, not so much trickles, sometimes it actually is like a river, goes back into the community. These are also signature events. We're not just simply fighting the ending of rodeos, we're fighting the ending of Norco as we know it today. We put an overlay, historic overlay over the entire city, and these three events are signature heritage events. I don't know if you know this, but the Norco Fair is actually the longest all-volunteer fair in the state of California, longest running. And I, for one, really thank all of those volunteers for putting this on. And for me, this money is not so much about the event, it's not so much about what it does for the community, it's to thank the volunteers, and I wish I could give you more. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Kevin. Catherine?
So I think that, supporting our community groups is a huge part of what we've tried to do with our COVID funds, which is why we had our small business program and our nonprofit program, was to look for ways to support our community groups that we know have been struggling because of the pandemic. And my second point that I want to make, and so I want to thank everyone who's been working on that and everyone who showed up tonight to express the support for the groups that have been doing this for so long in our community. I think it's also important, though, just to look at, good government. And what does good government look like, and what does the process look like, so that it's fair and equitable and transparent and clear for everybody. I think that there's a lot of support for this, and that's really great. I would like to see, a formal request come in from the organizations, because I think that's something that we would ask for anyone who's requesting things of the city. And I think it's important that we avoid any appearance of any sort of impropriety or favoritism, and that it's fair. So there's a clear process. If there's another group that wanted to come forward that needed assistance, that the process is clear for how they could go about to ask for the same thing. So thank you.
Ted?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Listening to Diane talk about the rodeo, I was its first chairman, 1985. Paid $3.50 for a seat. All wooden seats, $2,700. We paid for everything. I even had to pay for a dead tree, because Rio Dell made me pay for a dead tree that we had to pull out. We've come a long way. The posse's come a long way. Those seats are $12 a pop now. For that's 18 inches. That's all you get. So when I look at that and the cost, the last time they did a rodeo was 2019. And their costs were lower. And like everybody said, it's jumped up tremendously. So the reason I, went through and fought for this is prior to, as we were looking at, when the former director, Brian Petrie, was here, looking at the seating and finally trying to get some bleacher seats permanently at Ingalls Park. What happens? Shortages, trucking can't get it, shipping, and all of a sudden the cost of aluminum for bleacher seats just skyrockets. No concrete, you got to put on a pad. So all these things just threw our whole timetable off and how we were going to get things done. So trying to come up with an idea to help these groups. And then when I looked at what the costs were on the rental and how they shot up over 2 years, unbelievable. That's why just looking at the difference and trying to cover the difference for these groups. Because, as I said, it's right. How much can you charge? How much can you charge the residents in this town? They're all hurting. Inflationary, they're hurting. So we've got to support it. Over the years, the economic development and economic impact on this community from these three events is immense. You go look down Boot Barn. Everybody's got to have a new pair of boots. Go in, get new pair of jeans. They go through Tractor Supply. Somebody picks something up there. Restaurants, I can tell you, every one of those restaurants in town will see an increase. They always do. People that come in and out. As long as we get the fueling stations, people come in, they fill them up. Those are all economic impacts that we have. Those are positive impacts that each one of these events bring in. That's why I support this. And the other thing, when you look at, these are signature events. These are 3 long-running events in this town that are important. Yes, there are other events, but these are significant ones that are in the 72 when Horse Week started, even before, when it was an informal group. It was a place for parents wanted their kids to do something for that week to keep them out of trouble. They were off in spring break. It's moved around the day, but that's what they did. And finally it turned into ETI Corral 32 ended up putting on Horse Week, the first rodeo. It was the 7th largest IPI rodeo in this nation back in the early days. I know, I was there. So it's a lot of history, a lot of good things about this town, all bringing economic impact. That's why the $10,000 per group for the bleachers. As far as the $23,000 from the fair, for the Horse Week, for their losses, they got slammed. In March, the last event we put on, Bonnie, was the casino night, mid-March. That was it. Next week, we're shut down, and here the Horse Week was in 2020. Can't do anything. There are expenses paid. A book was printed. Everything was done. Shirts bought, T-shirts bought, whatever. Do I take it at a value that that $23,000 that I was given by their treasurer? Yeah, I do. He's an honest man. He's never cheated us. He's a former business person in town. $23,000. Did they pad it? I don't know. I would hope they wouldn't, because they're all residents of this town. They're volunteers in this town. That's the way I look at it. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Robin.
So I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what Councilman Hoffman said. There had been a subcommittee working with Mr. Petrie for quite a while on bleachers, and the story of adding bleachers to Ingalls, specifically around Moreno Arena, predated even myself. And when we formed the subcommittee, I thought it was the first time this had even been discussed, the addition or potential addition of bleachers around Moreno Arena. Come to find out, it had been discussed several times before. Councilman Hoffman has talked about the fact that the bleachers are one of the driving factors to making these events cost prohibitive, or at least a larger amount. The way that I'm looking at it, that might be something workable, in my opinion, without claiming that there's inequitable processes or anything. When we talked in the subcommittee about bleachers, we talked about positioning of bleachers, entry and exit of bleachers. We talked about how does that fit with the gold buckle area? How does that work with ingress and egress? We talked about restrooms. We talked about handicap. We talked all about that. And in discussions in that subcommittee, there was a mention of, putting in these bleachers is going to be permanent. It's going to be a lot of money. Is there some way that we can rent some bleachers and put them in a configuration and see how it works for an event? And then if it doesn't work for the next event, you can move them because they're rentals and try another configuration till you get to an iteration that will work for all of the larger events that take place in that facility. And so in my mind, I think that we can help the groups and help the city of Norco at the same time by the city of Norco renting bleachers and being able to, again, look at those configurations, look at the seating capacity, because we were looking at things of like, how high are they going to go? How close are they going to be to the top of the arena cover? Those were real discussions because of access and seating and the numbers we wanted to get to in that area. So, I've been kind of playing around with this in my head. I really think, when we look at the ARPA funds, obviously all three groups are worthy. But I also think that this could be a win-win for the city as well, to figure out before millions of dollars are invested into bleachers, let's do some rentals, let's see how this works and what's going to be the best for every single group. And so that expense is taken off the plate of the groups, not only the three groups that have the main events, but any other organizations or groups that will use those facilities between now and when we can figure out what works and get a potential capital project in place to add bleachers to those facilities. When Councilmember Hoffman talks about economic driver, absolutely, the events up there are, but if we have more seats, that's going to increase the economic impact or potential economic impact of the events that can be held up at that facility. So that's kind of where my head is at on this specific topic. Spent a lot of time volunteering at all three events, and the comments too, that we're protecting a lifestyle, that we're protecting a heritage, that we're protecting, for me, we're protecting community. And I think about the young people, and I think about the times where I would go to the fair or the rodeo with my kids that were little back then, and I didn't have to worry. my kids could go and they could have fun at Horse Week. They could have fun at the rodeo and the events, and I didn't have to worry because it was like an honest, pure community event, and I don't want us to lose that. That, for me, is the most important thing about all of these events. So if we can do our part and we can do something that's going to benefit the city, I think it really could be a win-win.
Thank you, Robin. I have a question for Michelle. Approximately how many different volunteer groups do we have in town?
Well, I would say off the top of my head, I could probably come up with 20.
Yeah, I thought it was a much greater number than that.
It could be.
Yeah. And so this is
Not
one.
me on that one.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head.
I concur with, Robin's sentiments in her comments on this, that all our volunteer groups, they're great city assets, and that we need to invest in city assets. I think a contribution that would lead to purchase of the bleachers in the long run is the smarter investment to make long term for our community. How we could offset the cost of the bleachers, look at the configurations, and see what's going to work, what's not going to work, and then eventually make that purchase, I think is going to give us the biggest bang for our buck, the benefit that's going to be long term, and then maybe it'll kind of keep us away from the ups and downs of the economic roller coaster that we're on, and we don't know how long that's going to continue. I'd like to have a little more discussion on how we can invest in that type of asset. Andy, are we limited? I mean, instead of like cash to a group, can we move forward like with the rental of an asset like that on bleachers, or purchase, or for a future purchase? With the allocation of these funds.
Yes. Simple answer, yeah.
It's all permissible.
Yes.
That's kind of the direction I'm leaning. I think that, because it also opens Horse Week, the fair, the rodeo. Absolutely. You have 100% of our support. The long-term investment that you've made in the city, but there's lots of other groups out there too, and then this, how would you say no to someone then? Like, well, you have to be, a group for 50 years or 25 years, or Bonnie, what if Horseman's, it's,
we're not asking for you to give.
No, I know, but it's like, how could you say no, right? That's kind of the direction I'd like to go. If we can spend the money, we have the money, let's make a serious investment in it.
Mr. Mayor, if I can add it.
Yeah.
Prior to going through, after we went through and looking at knowing that the permanent bleachers situation was going to be hampered because of the because of COVID, it's basically in the transportation. I did check on the lease. You pay whether you use them or not.
Mm-hmm.
So what I looked at was a 9-month lease to get us through all the 3 main events. And he goes, yeah, well, you're going to pay for the April, the August, and September, but you're also going to pay for those months you don't use them. So yes, you do. They're going to sit there and vacant, and the cost was still very high for them because of all the engineering and everything else that they would have had to do, and you switch them around. I just said, let you know, that was explored. Now, I only explored it with the company that they're using right now, which used to be Smith's Seating. It's changed now to Grandstands Incorporated, but they're just LLC. But just to let you know, that was explored. It's just he couldn't figure out, because for these guys, they make their money on portable seating, on constantly moving them and changing them, and that's the one thing. I just to let you know that was researched. But we can look into it again.
And
with
what
several
was the
companies.
dollar amount?
For that?
What was the dollar amount to
well,
to
he's
rent 'em
still
for
going to
9
charge.
months?
It was still going to be $12 every time the event comes in there. At that point, he didn't have any. It's not something they do, but he said it's still going to end up being about $12 a seat per event.
For the 9 months.
Per event. So if you had for those 3 events, but each time you go in there, because it's going to cost you. I said he didn't know how to figure it out, because that's not normally what they do. And there might be another company that does it, but they did not.
And who do we purchase our bleachers from? Was that Sturdy Steel?
Sturdy Steel out of Texas.
Okay. And did that subcommittee ever research purchase of bleachers?
We looked at the cost. The biggest cost was the concrete, because it has to be put on concrete. The rentals do not. The other thing is that we thought when the diagrams we provided them were also based upon what we had for years, so they wouldn't have to come out and re-engineer that structure. And what they provided us with I think there's 3 different diagrams that they used. They came through. But again, it was the availability of aluminum and the structural. Sturdy Steel is the major manufacturer for almost all bleacher companies in Texas. And then coming up, but they wouldn't do it on a piecemeal situation. They were going to do it on a complete. They wanted to do the whole thing. Just and I don't want to digress, because we're not getting on the subject right.
No,
but yeah,
but
we looked at it.
I want a couple of answers to that. What was the cost magnitude of that?
We're looking at over $2 to $2.5 million for those seats. And that was back then. That was last year on our last meeting. That's the concrete and the steel.
But not with a layout that you knew was workable. This was kind of a guess.
This was the workable one put out together by Sturdy Steel. They were the ones that developed these based upon what they knew they could put in there. Not what we wanted, but what they had. They had come out before and put these plans together when they did the initial building to encompass the whole thing. So that's what they did.
All right. Did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, to your comment, my experience, I've been banging around nonprofits for a gazillion years. And one of the things about these signature events, and when we've all seen them, one of the things about these signature events is we know the people. And when somebody calls me up to donate to Horse Week, I don't even think about it. I send them a check. I don't care. I know that person. I'm sending a check to that person. When Jim Sasson calls me about doing something for the Norco Fair, I send him a check. I know these people. And one of the things about nonprofits is what we know about these people is for years they've been putting these things on. And I've been involved and seen nonprofits that you have to build a trust. There's different kinds of nonprofits. There's nonprofits where literally the heads of those nonprofits are raping the nonprofit. There's an organization that's been here in town for decades, and the person the head of that's making $160,000 a year. But that's a nonprofit. But these are pure nonprofits where I dare say nobody's making a penny. And the proof is that tons of people like myself, like all of us sitting up here, we send checks because we know they're going to deliver. And so I think that when we start opening up, maybe to Catherine's point, we have to begin to do something where we vet them. But the reality is, to your point, we're a community. We know every single one of the people that run those events. From the guy that stands out there and directs traffic to the person handling the money. And we also know when there's been problems, new people have stepped in and put cameras on top of the money. We know the money's going where it's supposed to go. We know the events are being put on. So I kind of get what you're saying on the one hand, but on the other hand, you know, we always talk about equality and equity and all this kind of stuff, but the truth of the matter is what really brings people together is a common cause. Really. People don't want to admit that, but in Norco, we have a common cause. We like elbow room, we like events, we like horses, we like sports, and we're actually fighting for those things, and we know the people that we trust each other. Not 100% perfect, and maybe that's one of the things that bridled us when people kind of don't know that. They don't realize there's a level of trust here that's being erased in a lot of other communities. So for me, these three groups embody my trust in my community. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
I have a question for you, Kevin. Yeah. And I'm not trying to be devil's advocate. So these three groups do embody that spirit. What about the fourth group out there?
Give me a name.
Or the fifth, or the sixth, or the seventh, or the 20th.
Give me a name. The reality is I can name the groups I trust. LNCF, Kiwanis Club, Rotaries Club.
What about a group you don't trust?
I just got to know them. And you know what? It depends on who's in the group. It's not so much the group, it's who's in the group. Now, I totally understand a lot of people aren't going to understand that. I get it. But, I mean, if we want to go to where we have to have them turn in their financials all the time, we can most certainly do all that. But the reality is, most of the groups out there, I know the people and I wouldn't give them my money. I know them. And besides that, the proof is in the pudding. When I look at the fair, what do I see? When I look at the Mountain Posse Rodeo, what do I see? I know a lot of groups that, you know, they want certain things, but they can't even. I mean, when we started the LNCF, you were there. Mm-hmm. The reality is we paid for our own insurance. We went out and did our own fundraising for years and years and years and years and years. Until finally now, it's
and a kitchen table.
And a kitchen table.
Okay.
But I mean, the point is that we didn't expect people to help us right away and go, gee, you're not going to help me, but you're going to help them. That's not fair. They've only been here 50 years, but I've been here for 3 months. I mean, that's the point, is that sometimes, one of the things we're losing maybe is you earn it. We know who's earned it in our community, and I hope we can always hold on to that. And one of the ways you earn it is you take tickets at the rodeo, and you do all the things that you don't really want to do, and you shoot the breeze, and you volunteer for this and volunteer for that, and people get to know you. And the reality is that the most important, the truth is, they always talk about the good old boys club, but admittance is really easy. You just show up and become valuable. Period. And then you're like, they don't care what color you are, what sex you are. They don't care about any of that. They just know you're going to take tickets and you'll show up. I'm happy. So I get your point. I mean, at a certain point, maybe what we'll have to do is when we don't know each other, that we're going to have to do all that. But I'm also open to anybody that feels that they can prove themselves. We'll help them out, you know. And if we need to have a criteria, maybe it goes back to the old days when we shook hands. When somebody shook your hand, you're like, I'm going to put this on, and here's my money. Anyway, that's all.
No, it's just that I'm trying to find a solution with the bleachers, because that's the thing that always comes up. That's the big cost impact for all these groups. And it's investing in that city asset, that hard asset, that I'm trying to find that avenue. Catherine, any other comments, discussion?
You said you're saying it's excuse me, $12 a seat to rent them. So it'd be $12 for each event. How many seats? What's that cost? how many seats for each event? You know what I mean? Just get an estimate. We could just
Well,
cover the cost of the rentals for those 3 events instead of
Yeah,
for 9
it's-
months.
Well, each event use a different number of seating.
Right.
Like, for example, and I believe the posse, they come up there because what you have is your seating, even though our city brochure says there's 2,100 seats permanent there, you can only seat 1,500 people in there. It's just like when you rent them. I know it sounds, because it's an 18-inch seat and you get 24 inches of personal space. That's how the industry works. I didn't make it. So for the posse, for example, they go to as much as 4,000 total seats there. They probably rent 2,500. Is that what you rent? About 2,500, Diane. Horse Week will come in and they'll rent. They're going to try to just get 2,000. I think you're going to fit 1,900 and some in this year. The fair, they're about 15 to 2,000, right, Gonzo? Yeah. So that's what it's different. That's because the configurations are different for each event. So but when I work with the guy, it was the year round, and I understand what you're trying to do is the lease. It might be we have to go to another leasing company. There's only 3 companies in Southern California that rent seats. There's Mike Brown, there's American Grandstand, which is Mike Brown, and then the new guy Neil, who used to be Smith Seating. I can't think of his last name. That's Grandstands LLC. That's it. We got 3. The reason I don't know if Mike Brown might lease them or American Brown. The reason they don't lease them is because they can make more money on short-term rentals on a long-term, because it's just the way they work. But I mean, it's worth looking into.
So the cost would be for 3 different events, $12 a seat with the estimates that I heard. It would be about $78,000 to rent bleachers for the city to cover the rentals for those 3 events that are coming up, and then we can look for a solution with bleachers and other things in the future. But that seems a reasonable number to me. To just cover the rentals of what's needed for those 3 events, because it might not be possible to do, or harder to do, a long-term lease, just rent for those 3 months based on the numbers that we have. So I would put that, for feedback to my council members at looking at doing that. And then the configurations can be moved around, as Robin was suggesting, to look into what is the next step, what's feasible to do.
And I would probably go back to staff on that. We can look back on our Ingalls Park Master Plan Committee and work on that, something that we can bring back. And I agree with you, it should be a long term. And when we met with each one of these groups, what we were going to do with the seats, that's where we were getting their feedback, what was what. It's been needed for a long time. Tony's back there, he can tell you, we've been talking about putting permanent seats in for 20 years. So it's just, it's one of those things.
I wish we'd done it now.
I do too, but we didn't.
I have a question. What's the life expectancy on those bleachers?
We just fixed ours in the front, didn't we?
Are you able to fix them in-house?
We had to have a company come in and fix them, because they have to be inspected generally as they're structural. It's aluminum, but we had them replaced. What that cost, Diane? Do you know? I mean, Michelle, what it cost? You don't know? I know. I don't know if Andy remembers or if Lizette, but we fixed the front of him. He's looking at there. But we did fix it. We had to fix them. And just like the portables that the FFA and the 4-H groups purchased, just those 5-row high ones, those portables. Robin, you remember what the cost of those were?
They were around anywhere from $8,000 to $15,000, depending on the number of seats.
Per section?
Portables. Per section.
Per section. Yeah. They bought 4 sections for the total cost. That was, the wind destroyed 3 of the sections, just so you know. So we as a city have replaced those already. Right. So you can see that are they durable? Yes. But as anything that gets used, it's going to degrade as time goes through. But yeah, those seats have been in there since, if I'm not correct, Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, those seats in the inside were taken out from the outside and moved in. And inside the covered arena. You don't remember? No. The ones are permanent seats. They were originally outside and they moved in. years ago. Wrong. Okay, happened years ago. Okay,
You're
but anyway,
talking-
that's the seats.
You're talking 20 years ago.
No, when they put the cover up. Yeah, it's been 20 years since put the cover. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you were there.
I was there.
You're right.
But also, those were laid out with Hal Clark, Mike Montgomery, and Corky.
Yeah.
And we laid those bleachers out where that was going to go in relation to that whole arena
Yeah.
cover.
So,
what was that rental price again?
well, it's the rental cost right now is $12 a seat,
78,000, wasn't it?
78,000.
So how about this as a proposal for this, not to beat this into the ground, okay? The master plan that we've been talking about for all these years. Let's try to move forward on this. That it's like we've talked about it forever, okay? And this is not only this project, I'm talking about just other projects that we just haven't got off the ground, you know, for whether it's a year, 2 years, or in this case, tens of years, and try to improve that city asset.
Go with that.
So, can we just pick up the cost of the bleacher rental for all three groups for this year? Approximately $25,000 each.
And I guess that was my thing, you know, in the staff report, it talks about $10,000, but that's not going to cover the bleachers.
I mean,
No,
and that was
mine
the
was
main expense.
Yeah, mine
so-
was just to cut the difference. That was
yeah.
it.
So, I mean,
if it's allowable to use the
Yeah.
money, we have the money. It's part of the reason we're in this problem, because it's free government money, right? But exactly.
Well, I'll make a motion then to cover the cost of the bleachers for these next 3 events, the additional bleacher rentals.
Right now, you have
But
the cost
under
determined, so
under discussion on that. So you're going to have to modify the resolution on this.
Can I?
The resolution is open.
Yeah, it doesn't have an amount on it.
Fill in the amount that is the
Okay.
city council will approve.
Well, and you don't even need to fill in the amount. I mean, your approach is entirely different than the resolution. So you can make the motion in the form of a resolution, and then the resolution will come back to you as it's redrafted.
Okay. Because that's for all three groups in the resolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
cost of the bleacher rental for Norris would go.
Wait.
Well, they don't. Nobody knows.
What a discussion on that.
I mean,
If we're
go
going,
ahead.
if the city's going to pay for it,
Well, that's
there's also going to be an insurance cost on that too, because of that, because the agreements are rental. Because we're now the renters. If we're going to cover them, if they're the renters, it's just there's an insurance difference. So we might.
And what's that cost?
As I said, I don't know, because now we're the renters.
Andy,
And-
can we just cover the cost? Let's say yeah,
Yeah, you
as
just
a
reimburse,
reimbursable.
either assuming that the organization's the one who actually does the rental, you can reimburse the organization at whatever the actual cost is.
That makes sense. That way
it's not going to be the easiest financial paperwork wise if they just
I think that's the most
submit and
accurate.
reimburse.
Yeah.
Okay.
What the city council wants.
Lisette, you're the one that's going to get dumped figuring this out, okay? So are you okay with it?
I believe so. Based on the conversations here tonight, you know, that there's limited bleacher companies and, you know, they would go out to get the best price for those rentals of what is needed for the fair.
Although it sounds like the real motion is that the organizations are not are going to continue to contract, and we're simply reimbursing the actual cost without the city having to do anything else.
For the additional bleacher rental.
Right.
So I'll amend my motion to make it clear. So the city will reimburse the cost for the additional bleachers for the 3 events.
I have it to reimburse the cost of the bleacher rental inclusive costs, because you had discussed the insurance or
Well, that is,
just
if
the
they're
rental.
renting them, they already picked that
Wouldn't
up.
have inclusive. Okay.
If I can add, Catherine, can we add just for 2022 year? Because this is just for this year, correct?
That's what's in the motion
Okay,
already.
just for this year.
Okay. Reimburse the cost of the bleacher rentals.
There's additional.
Okay.
And we know what I.
The additional bleachers that are rented.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise they don't rent. It's whatever bleachers that they rent. I mean, the ones that are there, they don't rent.
Well, yeah, they do. The posse rents them. The posse rents those. The permanent ones are.
but those would be a fixed asset.
Yeah, those are fixed
right?
asset. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And the resolution will be modified to reflect that.
Yes.
Are we all good with this?
I have Councilmember Alleman as a motion. I need a second.
Second.
Councilmember Newton.
Robin seconded already.
And then
Did you-
we amended.
Oh,
So
you-
please
you
vote.
Put Robin's name on it.
Shoot.
And
Kept going sleep.
There you go. Yay. Motion passes unanimous.
Thank you.
So I think the ticket price is going to go up. I mean,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, that was.
What?
Do we want to? We're just going to not worry about the 23,000 for the, since we're already doing the bleachers. That was an additional part of it.
Free up more funds for horse races?
Yeah, that
since we're
frees them
paying
up.
for all
It's
the
up to,
bleachers?
if Tony's happy with that, that's I'm good with it. Yeah, you're good. Don't even worry about 23,000. Lost 23. I know. I'm
Okay, so motion's approved.
that we used.
Thank you, Denise. Motion's approved. Let's move into item 6C, City Hall exterior signage. Amanda?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight I'm going to give you a presentation on discussion item 6C, which is the City Hall exterior signage project. As part of the capital improvement program, the City Council allocated $150,000 in Measure R funds towards the exterior painting of City Hall, Nellie Weaver Hall, Riley Gym, and Fire Station 57. We originally were going to start the City Hall building earlier in March, but we withheld the painting. We moved on to Nellie Weaver Hall so that we could get council's decision on how to move forward with the exterior signage on City Hall. The remaining funding from the $150,000 balance will be used to purchase these signs. When reviewing the existing signage plan that is currently on City Hall, we became aware of changes needed to accommodate for recent modifications to operations at the facility. Staff is requesting your feedback before the signs are manufactured. Oops, sorry, I missed a slide there. Location 1 is the frontage of City Hall. We have 2 options for you. Option A is the replacement of the existing non-illuminated Norco City Hall text signs. And then also the two 24-inch diameter logos. This would be to replace what is existing. The total amount for this option is $8,000. Option B is the replacement of the non-illuminated text, the Norco City Hall, with the elimination of the two seals and just a larger 84-inch diameter seal in the middle of that wall. That total for that option is $14,000. Location 2 includes the entrance of City Hall and where the address numbers are for the building. As you know, the address numbers were knocked off many years ago, and it's been painted, and they do need to be replaced. The entrance will be placed above the main entryway, and this is because this is now the main entrance of the building. Location number 3 includes the replacement of the signs to reflect the new department changes, but previously this said Parks and Rec Department. Now it will say Community Services Facilities. Location number 4 is the replacement of the text in front of the Norco Sheriff's Office, and there is no changes to this section. Our recommendation is for council to approve the signage changes needed to reflect the current City Hall operations at locations 2, 3, and 4, and to direct staff to proceed with either option A or option B for location 1, which is the frontage of City Hall. Just to go over that again, the total with option A is to replace what is existing, and that would be $26,000. The option B is for a larger seal in the amount of $32,000. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
I have one. Is it possible to do the Norco City Hall? If you look at all the other ones, it's just the straight name. Is it possible just to have Norco City Hall and not have the two logos or the large round ball below it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Any other questions for staff? Do we have any cards?
I have a clarification on what Kevin was saying.
Go ahead.
So you just want to replace the letters and not the logo?
Yeah, because I don't know. I just think Norco City Hall looks cool all by itself.
Okay, that's just curious. Just trying to, I've understood what you were saying.
Yeah,
okay, thanks.
Just taste.
Do we have any public comment?
I have no speaker cards, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Bring it back to council discussion and action.
Mr. Mayor, Kevin, I like the big seal on there. Kind of looks like you go to high schools, go to colleges, boom, there he is, the big logo. That's what it means. It's a very significant thing. So I agree with you. You can put the letters up simple, or we can put our signature series up there, and that's our seal. So, but that, if no one else has anything, I'll make a motion.
I got some comments. Robin, do you have anything to say? Catherine?
My preference out of the two options was option 2 with the larger seal. I'm also fine if it just says Norco City Hall, so eager to hear what you say, Greg.
Okay. Option B. I like the larger seal.
Mm-hmm.
All I can say is we waited, when the numbers fell off the building, we went a year and a half or 2 years with nothing before somebody got up there and painted the numbers. So, looks a little tacky. And so any improvements you can make, I certainly appreciate it, but my vote would be for option B.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to
okay.
Option B. How's that? For option B on that, and we spend the $32,000.
As long as you don't paint the house numbers, you get real numbers put up there.
Well, we will
okay.
get real numbers for you.
Second?
And motion passes to approve option B.
Good job, Amanda. Thank you. Okay. We're going to move into public hearings. Dana?
Order of presentation for public hearing items, staff report presentation, council questions of staff, open public hearing with public comment, closed public hearing, council discussion, and action.
Thank you. Item 7A is consideration of the addition of a tree irrigation project on Hillside Avenue. Chad?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're bringing this item forward. It's been a discussion amongst council a couple different times as far as our history of the last few years. We've lost a lot of trees in our community due to disease and deteriorating trees and unfortunately poor trimming practices by outside agencies. So one of the things we try to do is make sure that we look at ways to try to plant trees. We recently had a tree grant that we applied for a couple years ago, and we were trying to plant more trees. That's a grant of 1,200 trees. But the problem has become locations where we can plant trees where there's dedicated irrigation to actually have these trees to be established. So one of the requests to staff was to look at an area where we might be able to do basically a testing program to put in dedicated irrigation and trees where we would provide that dedicated irrigation on the city's behalf for those trees in the public right-of-way area, determine if that's something that we want to do as a long-term plan to help promote more trees in our portfolio and improvements overall to the community streets, etc. Because most of the areas in Norco, unfortunately, don't have dedicated irrigation. Certainly on the east side of town, west side, there's a little more of that because it's more dedicated parkways with curb and gutter, and some irrigation has been brought out by the residents to some of the parkway areas to water trees. So there's definitely a difference in the overall settings. So one of the areas we looked at is we recently just did a project on Hillside Avenue between 5th and 6th. We basically did a complete restructure on that road. It had been in terrible condition for many, many years. We first replaced the water line there because it was too shallow, and then we replaced the road. Part of that including adding curb and gutter to control water flow. There was a lot of flooding issues on that street. We removed a lot of storm drain jail boxes that were in the trails. Those boxes you'll see when you're going through the trails just sitting right in the middle that pretty much you have to traverse. We got rid of all those and put the openings in the curb where they should be. So again, creating some improvements for the trail system. We widened the roadway because we needed to put the curb and gutter in. We didn't want to impact the ability of people to park on the one side of the road, which in this case on Hillside is the east side. So we widened the roadway, put the curb and gutter in so the road's wider on that east side and folks can still park where they normally had traditionally parked. There isn't parking on the trail side. There hasn't been parking on the trail side, and we're going to continue that. We removed multiple encroachments on the trail that were there that we had to deal with, probably 5 or 6 different homes. Thankfully, all the residents were very, very cooperative in that process and understanding, and our goal was really to improve the trail system for the community. And we adjusted the parkway to be wider so that we could actually put in plants or trees and provide that width where before it was about a 3-foot parkway, and we established a 6-foot parkway. And then pretty soon we'll be going through with our approved trail fencing project. We're going to put in the all new white vinyl fencing along that trail to basically complete that section. So that'll be starting in hopefully the next couple weeks. So we'll finish that area out. I did want to give you a couple photos of what was accomplished. This is an example of a trail encroachment. The driveway is really where the property line is. This is an example of encroachment. This is what it looks like today. Very clean, very straight. Really looks nice. Another one, you can See, the trail is almost non-existent. Where we're doing the new driveway approach, it's very narrow. This is what it looks like today. Very clean, very nice. But you can also see it's also very barren as far as in the parkways. There's a lot of space there available for planting of trees. In each of these photos, you can see on the after, we want to highlight, again, there's the trail system somewhere, but that's what it looks like today. So really good before and after ideas, but good clean parkways where we have a lot of real estate where we can plant trees and really improve. So I really wanted to see the before and after of what we're looking at, and we have those large sections. Unfortunately, I wish we had the trail fencing in and really get a good look at it, but the trail fencing is going to go right along that same alignment as you see the telephone poles. It's going to go right down that straightaway, so it'll look real nice and clean. So the tree and irrigation improvements that we want to do and are seeking City Council approval on is to plant trees in the open parkways that were shown in those pictures, basically in between every driveway where it can properly fit. Approximately about 65 trees that we're planting. There'll be various species that we're going to work with WCA, who's our current contractor in planting trees at the grant. So we'll use the CAL FIRE grant, which again the city's already funding to plant these trees. They'll also be maintained and monitored by WCA for at least for the first year. They'll make sure the staking's done, add amendments, etc. That in order to make sure these trees flourish. Plus, they also warranty that tree for a year. But part of that is we want to make sure, obviously, we have a dedicated irrigation system. It's difficult to get residents to volunteer to want to put irrigation out there and take responsibility for it. So we think the best thing to do is actually install a dedicated irrigation system that entire length of the roadway. To help establish the trees over the next couple years. We estimate the annual water demand is going to be about 151,000, whoops, I have an extra zero there, sorry, gallons, or about 203 cubic feet. That annual cost would be about $548 for the actual cost of the water, but we do have fixed fees for the meter that we install that we would also pay. So it gives you an idea of the annual cost. But staff anticipates reducing that water usage over the next 3-year period. The first year is obviously the pivotal year. Make sure we water it consistently and on a regular basis. Obviously, it will shift between the summer and the winter. More in the summer, less in the winter. But we're in a dry, arid area, and we've not really had much of a winter, so that water usage is conservative here, so we think it'll cover our needs. But what the goal is over the next couple of years, and working with WCA and talking with them about this process, they're confident that planting the right trees in the right area, hopefully we can wean down that water usage within a 3-year period or sooner, such that we can actually turn off the water system. But at least having the water system there, if there are trees that are struggling and need that water, even after a few years, at least the system is there. We can just modify the trees that need the assistance or not. So we're at least watering at a minimal level, but it helps support what the infrastructure we're putting in. The irrigation improvements, real quick, will be conducted by Nova Landscape Group, who's our current trail maintenance crew. Is doing all that work. They helped do a lot of that work there that you saw in those pictures and dealing with all the encroachments and then cleaning up the trail areas. So they were a key on that. The cost that they proposed at this time is $65,544. This includes purchase and installation of irrigation controller, PVC piping. There's a lot of that. Conductor wire, bubblers, backflow device that's going to be attached to the water meter, which we will install ourselves as far as the water division, and other miscellaneous components and fittings. So it's a long section, but they're confident that work can be done fairly quickly and getting it done this fiscal year. But there are other options you can consider. WCA does currently have in their contract for the trees to hand water under the grant. We currently in the grant, we've only elected to do that to a small group of people that originally applied for it when we were offering it in the grant program to not have to water. But that cost is $400 per tree for 12 months. So that'd be about 26, based off the number of trees we're planning to put in, it'd be $26,000 per year if we wanted to have WCA go out and hand water the trees instead of putting a dedicated irrigation system in. Over a 3-year period, you're about the same as far as the cost potentially. Obviously the water would go down, but their cost per tree is still the same, so it doesn't change for them. It's not a lower price on year 2 or 3 because we'd be using the set amount that's in the grant. but even WCA actually doesn't recommend to use this process for these trees. It would be much better for consistency and more reliable if you did put a dedicated irrigation system in. So while they would be happy to do the work, they actually don't believe it's the best thing for this particular type of project in trying to make sure they're getting established the trees and the look and the overall improvement to this street that we're trying to do. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. We did take this item to Measure Our group, talked about that and determine and get their support on this process. And they did give their support in doing this improvement. We do have a resolution that authorizes the funds. We are seeking, and I asked for $80,000 just to cover my costs because I've had this quote for the last month and going through the process to go Measure R and then come to council. I just wanted to make sure I had a buffer there just in case if costs went up. As we've heard tonight, a lot of costs are going up. I did talk to Nova. They do believe that they can maintain those costs at this point, and with the contingency, if it's authorized, that would probably cover any of the cost increase they may have to deal with, but they're committed to doing the work for what they propose. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions of staff? Kevin? Catherine? Why just one bid from Nova?
Mainly because we're our current contractor. We can go ask for some more bids, and if you want us to come back, we can. But they've been very good at all the work that myself and even Parks has asked them to do. They've did a very good job at the work up on Norco Hills Road. The work that they did with with Hillside on doing those encroachments and cleaning up the trail. So we look at it as more of an extension of their current contract of maintenance for us, and they've just been very good. So I
You still feel they're competitive?
Very competitive.
Okay.
I did inquire with WCA and asked them if they were to give me a quote. They said they'd definitely be higher than what Nova gave me, because that's really not their niche anyway. We'd have to. They do the tree maintenance part.
All right. Okay. No other questions. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Do we have any cards?
We have no public comment, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to council discussion and action.
Motion to approve.
I would like to discuss.
All right.
Okay.
First, I want to thank staff for.
No, there was no second.
I rescind the motion.
Thank you. I want to thank staff for looking to find solutions. You know, with our tree grant program, we were really excited and really hopeful when we rolled it out, and not all the trees were taken as we had hoped. And so looking for solutions for how can we continue to beautify our city, where can we put these? I think there's consensus from what I've heard on the council that there's a real need for these trees because we've lost so much of our urban forest. One of the biggest things I hear from our residents is to beautify our city. You know, to show that charm that we see in Norco. And, you know, trees are wonderful for so many reasons. And I wanted to discuss it a little bit more because in looking at this, the cost, it's about $1,000 per tree when you break it down. And so I was discussing with Andy, you know, trying to come up with what other solutions could we find, or are there any other ways that we could approach this other than kind of what we've done. And so Andy came up with a really great idea, a rebate program. Could we incentivize folks to plant trees? They would water them, they'd be in charge of watering them, but offer, for instance, and I'm just throwing these out here, right? But, you know, $20 off your water bill for, you know, each month for 2 years. If folks would put those in. So, and I ran the numbers on that. So just to kind of compare, to have another program to look at. So if we did something like that with the cost that was mentioned, $20 off per month, to plant the remaining 661 trees, if those all went to residences who would take advantage of the rebate program, it would be $158,000 for the whole 2 years of the program. And then if we incorporated the residents that have already planted trees, there are, I don't know, it's about 290 something that have already planted trees. It would be about $214,000 for the whole program, the whole 2 years, the whole rebate for all of those trees to be planted in parkways and in residences. I think that this solution's good because it's established irrigation, but I don't know that we want to, and that's where I'd like to hear the council's feedback to be able to sustain that on a larger scale, because this is only 65 of the 660 trees. But I do really appreciate that we were trying to find solutions to getting these trees in the ground and beautifying these streets.
Kevin? Comments, thoughts?
No. I mean, that sounds like a great idea. If we want to go down that route, I mean, how would that affect what's before us? Is that something, can we pass this now, or do we want to include her suggestions?
I think that's another total conversation on a rebate program.
Because she did say you would catch up the people who had already done it. So I guess, although we're putting these trees in, it's not like residents are doing it. So I think it's a separate issue.
Robin?
Yeah, for me, part of it is consistency throughout the city, potentially as we move through. And I've had concerns with the fact that, even looking at Temescal, for example, all of those trees that were taken out by current trail standards are unlikely to meet the criteria to be put back in. So, I feel like when roads are redone and we're getting portions of our community up to our standards, that implementing this kind of thing is an appropriate use. Whereas if we were going to do the rebate, program, I like the idea, but I don't see that being implemented consistently throughout our community where there's like a standardized kind of look. I still feel like there would have been more people take trees if there was the opportunity to do so. But with the new standards and the way things are lined out, it took it off the table for a lot of people. So I think this approach is fair and reasonable. And, if it's successful here, implementing it throughout the city as we have funds, I think is certainly doable, because I do miss the days of driving down every street in Norco and they were just tree lined, and it's just not that way anymore. So that's all I have.
Ted?
I agree with Robin. Trees are an asset. They're a public asset. And we talked about this with Chad about how do we irrigate these things. We took out the trees. Edison and the way they trimmed them, a lot of the pepper trees were aged out. What were those other ugly looking? They weren't. Yeah, the ones that were on Valley View and all those should never been put there. So the good thing about these are street trees that need to be maintained. I don't have a problem watering them. I've seen what happens when you have residents. It goes in and out. I mean, residents up in the hills, even though trees were planted in there, in the LMDs, oh, I have to water those? Yeah, you have to water them. They didn't. They let them die. So what happens is the resident that comes in sells his house and doesn't take care of the tree that the previous owner put in there. This is consistent. You got 3 to 5 years getting these trees started. I can't tell you how happy I was to finally see trees, the sticks that we stuck in the ground earlier this year, and started watering them, and to see them blossom out along Crestview, along the park, in Ingalls Park. Finally. Took me 10 years to get trees there. Happy they're there. So they're an asset. So I'm with this. As far as the idea of doing the rebates and things like that, I think it's a good program, but it might be more, it's a record keeping, a costly thing that goes down. I'll tell you, sometimes simple is better. And I'd rather see us start this program, see how it works, see if this is feasible. Like Robin says, as we do the streets and stuff, we increase the number of trees. We have these trees. You've got to get rid of them. What's the date? 2 years, 3 years?
Next March.
Yeah, so we got to get these trees in the ground. So, all right, thank you.
Okay. I think the rebate program's a good idea. I think it would need a lot more study as far as just how that's all going to be set up. But specifically for this item, that you did a full road reconstruction, water lines, storm drains, horse trail, curb gutter, and there's the old construction saying that I'm completely done except for finishing, and the landscaping is the finishing touch. So I certainly approve of going this route.
Just for clarification, the discussion with Catherine is in addition to this program. Doesn't eliminate what is being recommended, which is to continue to plant trees. I think her concern was that how do we get the trees that we have under the grant planted without some sort of incentive or push. Is likely that we won't meet the number of trees that we are required to plant in order to get the grant monies. So she was looking for somewhere, somehow, to get those trees planted. Doesn't take away from us continuing with this program or similar programs in the future. This is just a way to get the trees that we have under the grant to get planted.
How would you propose you would manage a rebate program?
So anybody who signs up for that would get whatever the rebate amount is through their water bill. They will be set up to get that credit through their water bill, and the water fund will have to pay for it. For example, if the general fund decides to pay for it, then there will be monies transferred to the water fund to make up that shortfall of revenue to the water fund. If this, for example, the city decides to pay for it through ARPA funds, the same arrangement could be set up. But again, she was looking for ways to continue to make sure that we plant the number of trees that we're required to do on it.
And then who's going to go out to make sure that I'm watering the tree that I'm getting $20 a month for?
That needs to be worked out.
But that would be another staff member and.
Yeah. So we actually, when we started the grant application, one of the suggestions that was in there was an incentive program of some manner. Ultimately, when we looked at it, we couldn't find one that could be administrative cleanly in working with finance and talking how it would be done. And the fall. I mean, again, we definitely have a problem in that we are just barely under the halfway mark, and we have a year left, and we're not getting a lot of participation. Is trying to figure out what we can do to incentivize people, and that's why I do agree with the councilwoman that what can we do, because the reality is if we don't plant the 1,200, we lose the grant money, and the question becomes though, with what you're going to spend in potential rebates is more than your grant money you're going to lose. Does it make sense? Is it better just to simply say we planted it X amount, we gave it a good college try, we got some in the ground, and then we figure out the next time if we're going to do a program, what can we do, what didn't work the first time that we can do differently? And so that's what I want to, I definitely want to try to figure out ways. We're certainly going to put it out again and say, if you're interested, the biggest hurdle, folks, as I talked before, is they don't have dedicated irrigation out there. So they don't want, because that cost is a lot more than maybe the $120 or $240 that they may get to put that in the labor, or they're just not able-bodied to do it, but they want the tree, all different reasons. So the question is, the incentive would have to be enough to motivate them to want to do that. Or you'll have folks, well, if I'm just going to hand water, is that acceptable, and I still get the rebate? And the answer may be yes. And it's just, but we have to then go out and make sure it's going to thrive and survive, et cetera. So we can look at those programs, try to see if there's something to develop. We initially looked at it, didn't see anything that would obviously work, but we didn't spend a ton of time on it. We were focused on just getting volunteers, people had irrigation, et cetera. We did come up with the other model of paying for water, and that was a pretty pricey number. So there will be, at some point, I'll be coming back to you to say, here's where we stand. We're still pushing trees and getting them in the parks, etc. But we may get to the point where if we can't find that mechanism to incentivize people to get the trees in, we will have to decide, do we want to go big and try to get people to do it to preserve the grant money, or simply say, let's just forfeit the grant money because it's not a significant amount in regards to what we're going to spend to get the trees in. But that'll depend on, we want trees, and that's an important thing. We really want to get those in but it may be something that we're better suited doing them as independent projects as we go along and do construction work. I don't have the direct answer, but unfortunately, I've already gotten a year extension. I'm in that extension now. My original 3 years is up, and I'm now trying to get those numbers. So it's been very slow going to try to accommodate that number.
I would just add, I brought this up because I think that this program that we have is more of a long-term program. And, given Andy's experience in finance, when he suggested the program, I trusted that it was something that could be done and wouldn't be overtaxing or, take up a ton of staff time, that it would be something that would, yes, it would take some effort, right, to implement, but that it would be feasible to do. And looking at the number of trees that we have such a short amount of time and knowing that that's something that we value, that incentive seemed like a win-win. As a resident, I would love $20 off that utility bill if I plant a tree and I commit to watering it, and I'm glad to hear that we're going to be communicating it more, because I think that's something as well. There's still people who don't know about that they can get a free tree. Not everybody is up to date on what's happening. So, looking for solutions and trying to get the trees in the ground. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what the numbers were when we approved that grant, but I think it's a couple $100,000 that, we might have to then repay for those trees if we lose that grant money. And so we pay either way. So I'd rather pay and have trees in the ground beautifying our community than paying money and not having that. And then I think that this is a good approach to move forward as we are redoing trees or redoing streets, and improving our community, that we have a plan to beautify those streets as we go, to keep that going.
So we're not penalized, aren't we? Also putting these trees in our parks?
Yes.
I mean, that would, just so we don't get penalized.
Well, no, we don't get penalized for planting the trees what we have, but if we don't meet our number of 1,200, then we actually lose the grant money that we were provided. So we had, the grant I think is $82,000 that we got from them, and we would basically, because we didn't perform, we would forfeit that money and have to pay whatever we got back. So that's the target number that we potentially would have to pay out of the general fund, or Measure R in this case is what we're funding it with, to cover the trees that we ultimately did plant.
Can some of the restrictions be eased?
We've asked that multiple times, where you could plant them. Could you just give them to residents and they put them in their front yard, backyard, and there's strict requirements. It has to be in a public area accessible to the public, which is the parkway or parks. It cannot be on private property. We jumped on that one right off the bat as an option to try to get people interested, and CAL FIRE said no, that's not allowed.
I want to clarify, the $82,000 is only the grant match. I don't recall what the actual grant total is.
Yeah.
It was,
so
that we would have to return.
You're looking for places to plant trees. We do own 130 acres just north of the river. I'm just saying, if I'm sure that, has anybody approached them?
Not this time, no, we haven't.
Okay, well, that might be a place to get rid of a whole lot of trees, because I'm sure those parents out there, when they come and take their kids for the weekend out there for 3 days, a lot better sit underneath a tree than underneath one of their shades.
Well, would the council be amenable to send this back to staff to see if a rebate program would be feasible, and then bring it back with a recommendation with the approval of the existing program that's on the agenda?
No. I'd like to move forward on this item, but have it, the rebate program, have that come back as a separate,
That's what I said.
separate item, but
Right,
move
but
forward
would we
on
be
this.
amenable to having staff look into that to come back? Because that could be added to this motion. That's why I wanted to do a pulse check here before I, yeah, okay.
I'm okay with
Okay.
that.
So then I will make a motion. Sorry, I need to move my Post-its. To adopt resolution number 2022-22 to add a tree irrigation project on Hillside Avenue, 5th Street to 6th Street to the Measure R capital improvement budget in the amount of $65,544. And can I add that second part to this motion? Okay. And to direct staff to look at a rebate program to incentivize the further planting of the remaining 661 trees under our grant program.
Second.
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 7B. First reading, ordinance 1082.
Yes, good evening.
Alma.
Good evening,
Good
Mr. Mayor,
evening.
members of the City Council. Agenda item 7B is zone code amendment or ordinance 1082 for zone code amendment 2022-01. And in a nutshell, what this code amendment, the proposal of this code amendment is to basically eliminate the provision for a temporary mobile home for the elderly for new ones that would be for new ones after the date of the ordinance adoption, especially since the provision for housing for the elderly can now be facilitated or provided through our accessory dwelling unit ordinance or ADU ordinance under section 18.30.46. If the council will remember, this item came before the city council last year as basically a discussion item where we brought forward a recommendation from the Planning Commission. We took a discussion to them, letting them know that, hey, since we now have accessory dwelling units, there's really no need to have temporary housing under the provision of a temporary mobile home for the elderly or a caretaker dwelling. The council's direction to staff was they were in favor of removing the provision for a temporary mobile home for the elderly, but wanted to continue the provision for a caretaker dwelling. And in addition to that, they wanted to see the list of the existing temporary mobile homes for the elderly. That list has been provided, was attached to your staff report. And in the interim, we continued the review of our housing element, where it was confirmed that requirement for a conditional use permit for the elderly temporary mobile home is basically considered a constraint requiring a conditional use permit. And as a result, in the housing element that was adopted, the City Council made a commitment to remove that section. Again, because there is provision in the code for not only housing for the elderly, but any other segment of the population through the provision of the accessory dwelling unit or secondary unit ordinance. The way the zone code amendment is written is so that it protects the existing temporary mobile homes for the elderly as they have been legally approved, but would prohibit any future temporary mobile homes for the elderly. The verbiage in chapter 18.30.35, which is mobile home temporary use for the elderly, it has been amended as outlined in your staff report. And basically, as I indicated, the intent is to protect those that have been legally approved, but prohibit any in the future. And with that, and this does not affect the caretaker dwellings as it has been left. Caretaker dwellings can still be approved with a conditional use permit. But keep in mind that this would be in addition to an ADU should a resident desire to have an ADU, and in addition to that, a caretaker dwelling. With that, I will conclude, answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. Does council have any questions of staff?
I do.
Ted?
Alma, you know, and I'm looking at your numbers here and your staff. What you're saying is you're going to put the mobile homes that are currently in there as part of the ADUs, correct?
No, they would stay as a temporary mobile home for the elderly because they.
For the elderly?
Yes, yes. And
Okay, so does this allow them to keep them there, or do they still have to remove them once they're no longer?
Yes.
Okay, because we're not allowing mobile homes. These are mobile, not modular, correct?
The conditional use permit has allowed modular and mobile home, provided they're on a temporary foundation.
Okay, but I'm talking modular.
Yeah.
Modular is different than mobile.
Okay.
Okay, because one is the actual house that comes in sections versus a mobile home, a trailer. Just put it there. And then looking at it, and the reason I'm asking that because mobile homes depreciate. They don't have an appreciated value. And they're like a car. They depreciate in value. And I'm looking at your map here, and as you see, looking at it, you've got 16 of them that are 20 years or older on your list. So most of those, if you try to get somebody to move them, they're not going to move them out because nobody takes them. They're 20 years old. They're beyond that. So that's what I'm saying. Are we allowing those to be now permanently part of ADUs?
They would have to go through the building permit process to make them formally permanent ADUs.
Okay, that's not what this does, right? This is because it
doesn't automatically make them ADUs, correct? If that's my understanding the question correctly.
Well, that's what I'm trying to clarify. Is that's not what we're doing here.
Correct.
We're just
Correct.
they're still going to be considered a mobile home.
That's correct.
So when they're permits or if they have to remove them off the property, correct?
If they no longer need them for what the conditional use permit was approved for, yes. Unless they come back and say, well, I want to make it an ADU, a permanent ADU, then they would just go through the, go through the permitting process for that.
Is that a ministerial process? So we wouldn't know. There would be no review. And you're going to do it over the counter.
Building permit, yes, that's essentially correct, yeah.
That's a scary thought. To do that, to take somebody's mobile home and word and approve it over the counter, that's now it's my ADU without anybody doing a check to see. Because some of these are going to be older.
Yeah. They would still have to, as long as they're certified by HUD for living purposes, they can still be, my understanding per our building code, they can still be considered a living unit for an ADU.
I haven't seen too many 30-year-old mobile homes. They're nothing but a fire trap. That's all for right now.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff?
Alma, it's personal. It says here temporary mobile homes master list, current and inactive, and then you have 3678, which is where I live. It's not a mobile home. It's actually a fully permitted home. Yeah, so it's actually was permitted pre-cityhood, and what I should have done, and now Jim Daniels talked me into being the first caretaker unit in Norco, and the reality is that they said there was a letter when my house that I live in, they moved on. The original house is the one that is not a mobile home. But he said, well, you got to tear it down or do this or that. There's a letter, and they never did produce the letter. I went ahead and went along with it. But the reality is that it's a fully permitted house. And it's been there. The first part of it was constructed pre-World War I, and then 50, 55, and 59, and I produced all of those permits from the county of Riverside.
Okay.
So it's not a mobile home.
Okay, I will take a look at that. Thank you.
You're going to have to remove it, Kevin.
Not a chance. Thank you, state legislature.
Any other questions for staff? We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Do we have any cards?
I have no public speaker cards, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to council discussion and action. Ted?
Yeah, I have a problem with this as far as with the mobile homes and making these ministerial approvals. right now at this time, unless there can be some teeth put in here and something in here for their inspection or review or something like that.
Oh, yes, as part of the ministerial, it's an actual building permit where it would require the inspections, required inspections, and you know, make sure that the unit can be considered a permanent. Yeah, it's a whole building permit process. It's, when we say ministerial, that means it's done at staff level, but that includes, you know, a building permit.
So it's just not over the counter,
No,
somebody
no,
checking
no.
the
Oh,
box?
absolutely not.
Well,
No.
that's what I thought you said.
No.
All right, thank you.
Robin? Catherine? No? Ted? Or Kevin?
My only question is, it has nothing to do with this. Are we at some point going to look at trying to legalize, so we're still looking at that year in process? All right, that's all. Thanks.
Question, Alma, on with a part of that review with a mobile home, would that also include a new site plan in that review, and would there be any conflicts with site plan?
You mean as far as
to take
oh,
take the mobile home and convert it to an ADU?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because the mobile home's coming off of a conditional use permit.
Yes. Correct.
Okay. And now to the ADU it wouldn't. So what would be the site plan review on that as it would relate, let's say, to animal keeping?
Yeah, they would have to submit their site plan through, well, as part of their building permit packet, they'd have to submit a site plan and everything else. The tie downs, or if necessary, they may need to submit that. But that will be routed to the planning department, where we'll look and see how they meet the requirements of an ADU. So yes, a site plan would have to be submitted. And if it hasn't changed, they can use the same site plan. But we would just have to analyze it per the standards of the ADU.
But you wouldn't anticipate any conflicts that way on?
Every CUP was on a case-by-case basis,
Right.
So that would be hard
I
to
don't
tell.
remember many where we considered animal keeping.
That's correct.
With a
That's correct.
mobile home conditional use permit for an elderly family member.
That's correct, because again, it was intended to be temporary.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
That's kind of my concern is, now that
if-
you're going to
if
go
I
to a site
understand-
plan.
Yeah. If I understand the concern, the bottom line still is that just the fact that it was there on a conditional use permit, that in order to convert to an ADU, it has to meet all the requirements of an ADU, and if it means that it can't stay in that place, after all, it's mobile, right?
Right.
That it
Okay.
has to move. But it has to meet all the requirements for an ADU in order to be
Okay.
approved.
All right.
Just based upon what John just said, the chances of these people removing them when the elderly person dies or that now is not going to happen. You're not going to get those notifications. Just about what you just said. If they have to put all that paperwork in.
I think it's a case by case that if it qualifies for an ADU, theoretically they're supposed to remove them when the elderly occupants left. As you pointed out, there are some that are 20 years old. We know that ain't happening. So that's a little bit of an issue. But if they can be converted to an ADU, then those problems go away. There's an advantage to doing it because it adds to the value of your house when you sell a house, that there isn't this mobile home stuck on it, that there's actually an ADU that you can rent and do all kinds of things with. So there's certainly advantages to ADUs above and beyond just having an elderly couple occupy them.
Guarantee they're not going to turn them in because it's going to cost them money.
Oh,
John.
no, I expect, look at the list. Nobody's removing them and nobody's saying, oh.
And well, this was something that happened later on, maybe started within maybe the last 5 years, where we had when they were approved under CUP, they were recorded on the title, and it would cloud the title that, you couldn't sell the property until it was removed. So there's a few of them that have that, and that was intended to be a safeguard to guarantee the removal, but the older ones, no.
Didn't we also have the yearly
Yes.
self-certification?
Yes.
We still do that? No would be the appropriate answer. But yes.
I send a letter every year. No, I send a letter every year. I'm assuming other people do, don't they? Oh, well, I'm gonna stop sending a letter.
Well, you don't have a mobile home.
A unit I'm required every year per the CUP.
See, I think you just admitted that you have a mobile home if you've been sending that letter every year.
Well, the mobile home is next to the caretaker unit.
No further discussion. I'm going to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 1082 for a first reading, amending Norco Municipal Code, Section 18.30.35.
Second.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Norco, California, amending Section 18.30.35 mobile home, temporary use for the elderly of the Norco Municipal Code to eliminate the provision for temporary housing, which is superseded by Section 18.30.46 accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. Zone Code Amendment 22-01.
Please vote.
We already voted.
Motion passes with Councilmember Hoffman voting no.
Thank you, Dana. We'll move into City Council staff communications. Does any city staff have anything to report? City Attorney? City Manager? I guess we'll go back to Michelle.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to remind you and invite everybody. This Saturday is kind of busy. We have Norco Seniors and Pets breakfast in the morning. At 9, we have the Easter egg hunt at 10, and we also have the grand reopening of Riley's Gym at 12 noon. So hope to see you all there.
Thank you, Michelle. Going to be a full day. Yeah. Ted, any communications?
Yeah, when you guys look at the Riley Gym, I got a chance to look at it. Think of that big area on the west side as a place to sell ads so we can fund these programs. Thank you.
Robin? Catherine? Kevin?
One of the things I want to maybe talk about in the next month or couple of months is next year is the 100th anniversary of Norco, and to maybe do some sort of an event maybe on May 13th. We were born in 1923. That's when we were officially named. I thought you were the attorney. Anyway, I think that maybe at some point, Andy, maybe we could talk about if council desires to maybe do something next year. I'm not certain the whole year thing like we did with the 50th anniversary, but one day where we do something. And just to sort of celebrate the fact that we've been around for 100 years.
Another time capsule.
Another time capsule, sure.
Okay, nothing else? Thank you all very much. We're adjourned. Yep.